What do values and beliefs reflect in the world outside of our own minds? I would assert, at least, our behaviors. There is something going on in language that is truly remarkable. Its complexity, at least, compared to other known forms of signaling between life forms. We are the humans. To flourish, we must communicate well with one another. Abstraction, for present discussion, is the assertion that some concepts can be expressed with few words and yet wield vast and profound meaning, and that some concepts must be expressed with many words in order to be conveyed with specificity and correctness. Further, that this application in language is suggestive of something real about the complex natures of information and reality. I will describe abstraction here as a dimension along which concepts can be more abstract or more tangible. My offer to you is that better understanding the distinction between abstract and tangible concepts will be useful for improving writing skills, for improving the ability to isolate critical information from fluff, and for understanding and enhancing values and beliefs. Let's start with how abstraction in language is substantiated more fundamentally. The ability to abstract seems to be a necessary feature of our conscious experience. We are conscious, and we understand reality apparently well enough to navigate it for the duration of a lifetime. We learn what uses we might have for objects, though these uses are not materially inherent to the objects themselves. We chunk meaning into bits of information, and we think about these bits. We distribute these bits amongst one another with grunts or words and sentences. There is something going on in language that is truly remarkable, its complexity at least, compared to other known forms of signaling between life forms. Syllogisms, prose, poetry, narratives, each of these styles or forms of language are able to package and deliver incredible lessons between people. Consider definitions. As an example, Merriam-Webster defines the word near as a preposition meaning close to. Simple enough. Proximity is a highly tangible concept. We have bodies that are extended in space up to the boundary of our skin. As children, we bump into things and we throw sticks for dogs to retrieve. And in these ways, we experience the meaning that we agree the word near represents. We get really good at this experiential learning process. We learn more abstract concepts as extensions of tangible ones. We learn the meaning of the word school as the place the bus takes us to. And then we learn the meaning of education as the spirit of what we are at school for. We learn the meaning of the word church as the place we sometimes go to for an hour on the weekend. And then we learn the meaning of religion as something like a set of behaviors and associated beliefs, the spirit of what we go to church for. We learn that certain groups of words are associated with semi-exclusive groups of meanings. Apple juice and breakfast and cereal and bagels and food and meal and drink and chew and swallow and health and digestion and diet all fit together. They don't have identical meanings, but they refer to concepts that are categorical around the concept of eating. Bed and lamp and dresser and closet all have a conceptual proximity to bedroom, but in contrast, a conceptual distance from, for example, the Great Barrier Reef or nuclear fission. However, it is possible to conceptually connect these words, trivially, with the category of words as such. Typically, concepts that can be used to bridge more connections between concepts are more abstract. Specific words, for example, book, are tangible. The concept of words as such is more abstract. Many specific concepts, for example, repetition, are quite tangible. The concept of concepts as such is more abstract. The fact that across geographic and ethnic populations we have developed many different languages is evidence that our vocalizations, the sounds that we make, don't have inherent meanings. Definitions of words are the consensus meanings referred to by sounds that we make. We use language as a proxy for meaning. The symbolic nature of language is extended further with writing. Logographic and alphabetical writings are the combinations of shapes that we have agreed represent vocalizations and meanings. The shape of a lowercase letter g, with its loop and swoosh, doesn't inherently carry the meaning of the g and j sounds. This must be constructed. The meanings of many words containing the letter G are also unrelated. Think gingivitis and galaxy. When we learn to read, we learn the mapping of sequences of characters and symbols to real concepts and to their vocalizations. When we learn to write, we learn the mapping of motions of our hands and arms and eyes to these sequences of characters and symbols, and to the real concepts they represent. It is worth noting that this series of real meaning, synthetic understanding, and evocation of symbolic representation is not restricted to language. For example, I find that it is integral to the process of learning and performing music. I am an unprofessional but trained intermediate classical pianist. When I first approach a new piece of music, I listen to it. Through this exposure, I can become broadly familiar with a piece. To learn to play it, I find I must work through each note, each measure, first as symbols on a page, of course, but then as a phrase or a musical chunk. To learn a piece to the level I would feel comfortable performing it publicly, I must practice until I don't conceive of the piece any longer in terms of any one note, measure, or phrase, but rather in an internalized and synthesized way. I assert it is true to say that through sufficient practice, I become the thing that can evoke this piece of music from a piano. When I do, I start to play. And the music has my full attention and is my action for some period of time, and then it ends. This is an illustration of abstraction. As an exercise, I invite you to decide whether you would agree with, would need to qualify, or would disagree with any of the following loosely related statements. Facts are true. Good ideas can be viral, and viral ideas will evolve. Some conversations are about learning, and some conversations are about winning. We naturally imbue personal values into our arguments and claims, and we are sensitive to and judgmental of the values of others with whom we converse. Reflect on the experience of considering these statements in their sequence. The first statement, facts are true, is a bit plain and straight to the point. Having directly followed a prompting that there would be multiple related statements, it suggests there might be a category for these statements, one centered around information. It's probably a true statement. It is stated as a definition. The second and third statements discuss ideas and conversations and learning. These are also probably true, though not because they are definitional, rather they are broad and subjective. One could reasonably ask in response, okay, but what do you really mean by this? The fourth and final statement uses more words than the first three combined and is conveying a more nuanced and arguably specific concept. It is a claim about beliefs and behavior. These examples should also illustrate this dimension of ideas, this spectrum between tangible and abstract. Some applications of language tend to be more tangible, and others tend to be more abstract. The commands that parents give children when teaching them basic life skills are usually pretty tangible. Flush the toilet. Place the fork next to the plate. Don't do that thing because I said so. These leverage concepts involving action, objects, and direct appeals to a present authority. Later in life, we might tell a young athlete, what's important is not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. A statement like this suggests an ethic, that good play is such that it is inviting for others to be more likely to include you in their play in the future. We grow and learn to say more. We can express and perceive implied meanings without their literal reference. What is tangible is what is obvious. Abstraction is about compression of information. Notice the difference between statements like, somehow Palpatine returned, and do or do not, there is no try. Notice the difference between statements like, do you think I understand a word you say? And you're the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. Good writing tends to toe the line between tangible and abstract. It is playful with this dimension of ideas. It often has an organized or patterned form. Bland writing tends to lean too heavily towards being tangible or too heavily towards being abstract. Why precisely do we find some writing to be incredibly moving and memorable? Consider some big hitters from American presidential speeches. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Consider Shakespeare. No legacy is so rich as honesty. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more. Consider a religious verse. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Why do words like these compel us as they do? One need not necessarily be an American or a thespian or a Christian to recognize that these statements, both in form and in meaning, are lovely. I cannot explain this phenomena completely, but I will use analogy to paint a picture of my understanding. I wonder that our fascination with good writing, of its quality that it captures our attention, is something like our fascination with music or with dance. There is a natural element. We can recognize that making music and dancing are behaviors not unique to humans, though perhaps they are elevated by us. For many animals, dramatic performances captivate and demand attention. Music is full of patterns and layers. Music is often structured with a key and a time. It builds motifs with melodies and harmonies. Beautiful poetry also does this. Robert Frost's Fire and Ice, for example, has characteristics of form that are alike to some musical preludes. Dance also has this quality of patterned complexity. Ballet dancers train to create precise lines and curves, athletic feats which we find visually beautiful. Modern dance rejects this structure, favoring freedom. Classical ballet and modern dance are a dichotomy akin to poetry and prose, or fugues and jazz pops. The ways that we admire each of these art forms feel to me to be similar to the way that we admire good writing. There is something about the substance of each that transcends this barrier between simple and complex, that moves up and down the spectrum of abstract and tangible. Daniel Kahneman, author, psychologist, and economist, is quoted in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. This is the essence of intuitive heuristics. When faced with a difficult question, we often answer an easier one instead, usually without noticing the substitution. This is apt and suggests a sense of what I am proposing. We use language the way that we do because we are fundamentally limited beings. We can't ever harness enough information to describe or even be aware of all of reality. We don't conceive of most of it at any point in time, often only the smallest applicable fraction. We have heuristics, strategies of conception which make no promises to be rational or logical or optimal, but which are useful and powerful. This substitution or compression of information we are all capable of, and the efficiency of which in some ways makes us uniquely human, is at the core of this dimension of abstraction in the space of ideas. An area of language that is typically more abstract is that of values and beliefs. What do values and beliefs reflect in the world outside of our own minds? I would assert, at least, our behaviors. If I were to ask you about your values, I would leverage the concepts of right and wrong, good and bad, morality and ethics. Pretty abstract concepts. Notice that moral statements are often a compression of predictive behavioral statements. The statement, murder is immoral, uses three words to say that which might be similarly stated as, supposing I were in a circumstance where I perceive a viable option for my behavior to include murder, I should prefer to reject that option. Further, I hope to live in a society in which most others share this intuition. The statement, hard work builds character, uses four words to say that which might be similarly stated as, I have met people who are more likely to be selfish and to think of themselves, and I have met people who are more likely to be giving and to think of others. And I find a correlation between those that work hard and that lean to the latter disposition. And so it is my recommendation to you to be a hard worker to maximize the probability of becoming a good person. We hold all kinds of similar and hopefully more subtle preferences. Where we are psychologically congruent, these abstract preferences are reflected in our tangible actions. Note that in this way, it is difficult to conceal one's values. An attentive viewer can usually accurately, inductively conclude the abstracted values of a person, of a subject, given that person's behaviors and speech over time. It is my hope that this discussion is a helpful illustration of the spectrum between tangible and abstract, which can be used to describe ideas and concepts. The following is my closing call to action. The next time you are having an interesting conversation, pause and notice why it is interesting. How are the ideas that others are offering to the conversation reflected in what you already believe? Do you think what you are saying is profound or obvious? Are you learning something? It is my hope that by better distinguishing between tangible and abstract ideas, we can get better at understanding one another. We are individuals. We are our relationships. We are families. We are communities. We are populations. We are the humans. To flourish, we must communicate well with one another. Thank you.